Some people refer to their spouses like, this is like my right arm. And she's like both of my arms and my legs and half my head and all of my heart.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Rolonda Watts. That was Scott Falater you just heard, who was convicted of murdering his wife. He claims he doesn't remember a thing about it. He doesn't remember killing her. He says he was sound asleep at the time. His mother believes that Scott was sleepwalking, and we just spoke with her. But the person who disagrees is Juan Martinez. He prosecuted Scott for the murder of his wife. You say you don't believe this story.
Of course not. He's a manipulator. Throughout the trial, and as he took the stand and he cried in his story to the jury, it became clear that he had a problem. And that problem was that there were no tears, just a lot of bad acting.
So you believe this was an intentional murder?
Without a doubt.
His mother is here. Why don't we go and talk with Lois? Lois is Scott's mother, who says that Scott didn't have any problems with his wife, that he was a nice, decent man who had a sleeping disorder that led to this crime.
Well, what can you say about a mother? You would expect that a mother would say that her son is somebody that's good. It's obviously somebody that she loves. So no, that doesn't surprise me.
You're so used to dealing with criminals that you think everyone is like that. You're not used to dealing with people like Scott.
I'm used to dealing with criminals.
That's right.
True. And he's just one of them, unfortunately for you.
No, he's not. You don't know him.
Excuse me. Unfortunately for you, he's just one of the many that has killed his wife.
I'll tell you something, Juan. You had your turn. Now it's my turn.
And I'm willing to listen to you.
You manipulated and you twisted and you misbehaved during that trial, right and left. In fact, you were reprimanded by the judge a couple times.
Juan, answer this for me. Tell us what those things were that led you to make that decision that he's a so-called monster.
The problem for Ms. Wolchek and the problem for those that believe that he was sleepwalking is that the evidence just indicates that he is a monster. He stabbed his wife 44 times, and after he stabbed his wife, he then turned around and took off all the clothing that he had so that he got rid of the evidence, stuck it in a Tupperware container. Then he took that Tupperware container, stuck it in a plastic bag, stuck it in the back of a Volvo, but he wasn't through yet. He then went upstairs to clean up, just like somebody who is calculating this murder, and after cleaning up, he came downstairs and washed up some more. He looked outside to see that his wife was still out there, and when he looked outside, he noticed that the dog was just right outside the door. So in a motion to quiet the dog down, he made the motion, walked outside, stood over his wife's body, and as she issued, if you will, close to her last gasp, he decided, she's not dead enough. Went into the garage, got some gloves, put them on because, of course, he didn't want to sully himself. He didn't want to get any more blood on him like he had before because now he'll have to clean up again. Walked on over to the body, grabbed her by the hands and began to carry her or push her towards the pool. Once he got to the pool, he rolled her body into the pool and then just didn't walk away, didn't do anything like that. He held her head down to make sure that she was not going to live through that night.
Juan, you were trying to look for motives. You never developed a motive, did you? And there wasn't a motive.
You're asking me to take a look into his head. I am not a murderer. I can't identify with him.
Well, the people that looked into his head said he was not.
I'm sorry, I don't really care about motive at this point. If I'm not mistaken, this man admitted to killing his wife. My question is, are we trying to establish whether or not he is culpable for his crime while he was sleepwalking? I mean, the man, he said he was...
he said he killed her, but he didn't remember it because he was sleepwalking.
Okay, so is he culpable or is he not?
He's morally innocent.
And Juan, I've got to tell you this, too. I spoke with him from the prison on the phone, and he did sound like a nice man. He was very giving, very open. Maybe that's part of the manipulation. But I'm going to tell you where he showed the most emotion, and that is when he talked about his wife of 20 years. The fact that this was the only woman he'd ever dated. He met in high school. She was the spunky girl he loved and would never, ever think of leaving, much less killing. Here's what he had to say about his love for his wife, Yarmila.
I loved my wife. She was my best friend, my best companion. She's the best thing that ever happened to me. We had a strong, solid 20-year marriage. We had had some rough times in the marriage. Those were long in the past. And at the time that this happened, we were as happy as we had ever been.
The prosecutors, or at least the investigators, said during your interrogation that there were no tears. What do you say to that?
I was still numb. I was still not fully accepting the fact that she was gone, and certainly not that I was responsible for it. And I was more in a mode of worrying about the children.
It's interesting because I'm watching the audience as you're listening, and some of you are going, well, yeah, I could see that he's numb, and I see you going back and forth. One of the things that we haven't made clear, Juan, is what was the motive, according to the prosecution?
We don't know. As I told you before, that's one of the things that we don't have to prove. We don't know what killers think. Because if we did know what killers think, then obviously we would do something so that they wouldn't go about doing such things as this.
Is that good enough for you, Lois Wilczek?
No, of course not. You always have to establish a motive. You know that.
If I needed to establish a motive, I would have lost the case and he would not have been convicted. So that's not necessary.
Okay.
Okay, I heard you say that you told your son, I'll fix this. What I want to know, the defense, the sleepwalking defense, whose idea was that? Was that your idea, his idea, or his attorney's idea?
Believe me, that would have been no idea any of us rational people would have had.
Whose theory was it, Lois?
Well, here's how it happened. We were trying to figure out a way, a reason why this had happened, because obviously it did.
Oh, Lois, I got to jump in here.
Okay.
I got to jump in here, Lois.
Misspoke myself.
And you know, and with all due respect, be totally honest with us. Because I think what people are saying is, as a mother, we understand you would do anything for your child.
Well,
but
remember this is very important to me. I want to get my point across. This is my chance.
Well, you got some folks out here who said, oh, she wants to fix this. Oh, we were looking for a way.
I told him I would fix the problem because I knew he was not guilty of doing this. However, he said, they tell me I did, and that guy has no reason to lie. He's my friend.
We have so many questions about sleeping disorders. Can this really happen? Joining us now by satellite from Chicago is Dr. Rosalind Cartwright. She is a sleep expert from Chicago's Rush Presbyterian St. Luke's Medical Center. She actually was the one who defended Scott at his trial. Thank you so much, Dr. Cartwright, for being with us. What I'd like you to do is take us back to that courtroom that day. What did you tell that jury?
I laid out for them the characteristics that we have now codified as a sleep disorder named sleepwalking with violence. And I told the jury that the characteristics of this are these are people with a genetic flaw, if you like, in being able to go from deep sleep, which is restful, restorative sleep, up to the active sleep in which dreams occur. They can't make that transition always without an abnormal arousal. And that abnormal arousal can be violence.
Dr. Cartwright, you know that all sleep experts are not agreeing with you on this, of course. We have someone who does not. Come on, this is Dr. Jonathan Rossman. He is a forensic psychiatrist, and you say what?
I don't buy it in this case. I think the complexity of his actions and the actions after the stabbings are particularly convincing to me and reek of guilt.
You have a list here that we were talking about earlier,
Right.
some 65 things that blow this case out of the water, if you say, in terms of proving that he was not sleepwalking. Some of those complexities are?
Well, I'll focus on the three main points for me. The first is his efforts to conceal things after the stabbings. Efforts to conceal something is not what someone who's sleeping does. You have to be awake to get into that kind of complexity.
And when we're talking about concealing things, we're talking about, you mean putting the bloody clothes and the knife into the Tupperware case?
The Tupperware into a garbage bag, the garbage bag into a wheel well. Then he goes back and forth with gloves, washing his hands, putting the gloves back into the Tupperware in the garbage bag in the wheel well. So there's all kinds of efforts here to conceal his role in this.
Why would he try to conceal something in an open hatchback? All you have to do is look in the window and there it is. He tried to conceal his wife's body in a pool with the lights on.
Well, he wasn't aware that he was being watched by the neighbor, and he had the whole night to take care of the body afterwards.
He wasn't aware of anything.
One other point that we need to make with regard to Dr. Cartwright is that she reached her decision that this individual was sleepwalking without even talking to him, without knowing the facts of the case. In fact, when I asked her,
that's not true.
Excuse me, I gave you your time. With regard to the questions about the facts, I asked her, well, why don't we talk about the knife? Because she didn't know anything about it.
Give her time to explain it.
Excuse me. I asked her about the knife. I said, hey, what about the knife? Let's talk about the condition of the knife. And she indicated, I don't know anything about the knife. I don't want to talk about the facts. Didn't want to talk about the facts, didn't want to talk about what happened, reached her conclusion without ever having talked to the defendant. And quite frankly, one of the other things that came out was that she and somebody else attempted to manipulate the medical records to show that he actually attained what they've been talking about, the deep sleep. Initially, when they did the test, it came out that when they actually had an independent person review them, that no, he had no deep sleep, or he had very minimal deep sleep. When she came onto the scene, she decided, oh no, he had deep sleep. And I asked her, well, where's the standard that you have that indicates that there is this deep sleep? And she went, and this was something prophetic, pointed to her temple and said, it came from my head. Basically, she made it up. And now she comes on and she wants to continue that.
And Dr. Cartwright is here to defend herself. And Dr. Cartwright, you jump in if you have to. One of the arguments is that you lawyers are having a good time, too. You're so busy trying to get somebody behind bars that you're not even considering that there could be a dysfunction in the brain that leads to this.
The prosecutor was thinking about Yarmela Falater as she lay there with 44 stab wounds, and she was stabbed to the point where she could feel what was going on, she could see what was going on, but she could not speak. So she could watch him as he did this to her. So we've been talking about Scott, and we've been talking about how this poor guy, you know, loves his wife. He loved her to death, didn't he? When he stuck her head down in that water.
Dr. Rosman, you wanted to say something too.
Yeah, in a case like this, it's not enough to show that someone has a sleepwalking condition. It's also, you have to apply it to the particular facts of the case. He gestured to the barking dog to quiet it. Now, that means that he had some recognition of that this was a dog that was barking. How come there was no response to his wife's screams, which alerted the neighbor, who then called the police?
The neighbor did say that there were 30 minutes of screaming. When we come back, I want to discuss the key piece of evidence that led the jury to convict Scott Falater of first-degree murder. He is right now facing a life in prison.
I left the jail that day convinced that Scott did not know what he had done.
12 people that were not his friend who sat back and listened to the evidence said, you know, Darrell Williams, you're wrong.
What do you say now? Have any of you changed your minds?